The Malta-class aircraft carrier was a British large aircraft carrier design of World War II. 4 ships were ordered in 1943 for the Royal Navy, but changing tactical concepts, based on American experience in the Pacific War, caused repeated changes to the design, which was not completed before the end of the war. All 4 ships were cancelled in 1945 before they were laid down. Background: in July 1942 the Royal Navy formed the Future Building Committee, chaired by the Deputy First Sea Lord, to examine the fleet's requirements for the rest of the war, tasked with anticipating the Navy's readiness and requirements for January 1944. The committee realized that a major expansion of naval aviation was required, which meant that more aircraft carriers would be needed. Many factors combined to drive up the size of these new carriers, notably the increasing size and speed of aircraft and the desire to increase the numbers of aircraft aboard fleet carriers. Another important consideration was the change in carrier tactics from the earlier doctrine of more attacks with smaller numbers of aircraft to the use of large, single airstrikes. Sir Stanley V. Goodall, Director of Naval Construction, proposed a variety of designs, both open and closed hangar. On 8 October 1943, the Board of Admiralty selected a closed hangar design with an armored flight deck and 5 propeller shafts. Reports of American operations in the Pacific convinced the board to reconsider hangar design. American experience had shown that the ability to fly off all of a carrier's aircraft in a single airstrike was vital. That required a well-ventilated open hangar design, which would reduce the time required to launch the aircraft by allowing them to begin the typical 15-minute engine warm-up while still in the hangar. On 15 May 1944, the board reversed itself and ordered the DNC to produce an open hangar design with deck edge lifts. An unarmored flight deck was agreed upon in June by the Controller of the Navy and the Fifth Sea Lord. The new design, 900 feet long at the waterline and known as Design X, was submitted to the board on 10 August, although it was not approved. In October, concerns arose over the size of Design X in that it might have problems maneuvering in constricted harbors, and the DNC was asked for 2 smaller designs, X1, 50 feet shorter, and Y, 150 feet shorter. Design Y was too short for efficient operations with the larger aircraft the committee anticipated, and the First Sea Lord selected X1. It was submitted to the board on 12 April 1945 and fully worked out in anticipation of approval that never came. The board minutes for 31 August noted that further consideration of the design had been postponed. Description: had the X-1 design received final approval, the Malta-class would have been about the same size as the American Midway-class aircraft carriers at 897 feet in length overall and 850 feet at the waterline. The beam would have been 115 feet 6 inches at the waterline, and they would have had a draft of 35 feet at deep load. The ships would have displaced 46,890 long tons at standard load and 57,700 long tons at deep load. The metacentric heights were estimated to be 8.42 feet at standard load and 12.8 feet at deep load. Their complement was expected to consist of 3,520 officers and enlisted men. The 888-foot flight deck had a maximum width of 121 feet 9 inches, because the unarmored flight deck required an expansion joint about amidships. The Maltese island could not be a single structure and was split into 2, each section with its own funnel. This allowed turbulence around the islands to be reduced and provided more space for radars and fire control directives. The carriers would have been fitted with 16 arrestor cables that were designed to stop landing aircraft up to 20,000 pounds in weight, at speeds of up to 75 knots. They would have been backed up by 3 crash barricades to prevent landing aircraft from crashing into aircraft parked on the ship's bow. Positioned on the forward part of the flight deck, 2 newly designed hydraulic aircraft catapults were intended to launch fully laden aircraft at 130 knots. The ships were designed with 4 30,000-pound lifts, and 2 on the port side deck edge, to facilitate the rapid movement of aircraft between the flight deck and the hangar. This was 440 feet long, with a maximum width of 90 feet, and 17 feet 6 inches high to accommodate American aircraft designed for the tight. In case of fire, the hangar was intended to be divided by 4 sliding steel doors. Between the hangar spaces and the deck park, the Malta-class would have been capable of accommodating between 80 and 108 aircraft. For these aircraft, the ships would have been provided with 190,000 imperial gallons of aviation gasoline. Propulsion. The ships would have used 4 Parsons double reduction geared steam turbines, each driving 1 shaft, using steam supplied by 8 Admiralty 3-drum boilers. The boilers were distributed between 4 boiler compartments, but all 4 turbines were in a single compartment, well aft. The turbines were designed to produce a total of 200,000 shp, enough to give them a maximum speed of 33.25 knots. The Malta-class was designed to carry a maximum of 7,000 long tons of fuel oil and diesel fuel. This was intended to give the ships a range of 7,100 nautical miles at 20 knots to 5,600 nautical miles at 24 knots. Armament. The ship's main armament was intended to be 16 quick-firing 4.5-inch dual-purpose guns in 8-powered RP-41 Mk7 twin-gun turrets, 4 on each side of the hull. The gun had a maximum range of 20,760 yards at an elevation of plus 45 degrees and a ceiling of 41,000 feet. The light anti-aircraft armament would have consisted of 55 40mm Bofors AA guns in 8 sextuples stabilized, powered RP-50 Mk via mounts and 7 single mounts of an unknown type. The Bofors gun had a maximum range of 10,750 yards and a ceiling of 23,500 feet. Electronics. An August 1944 study anticipated that the ships would carry 4 early warning radars, including height finders, 4 surface search radars and 8 gunnery, fire control radars. Historian David Hobbs wrote that they would mount Type 960 early warning, Type 982 intercept, Type 983 height finding and Type 293M target indication radars. In addition, a number of gunnery radars would also be needed. Protection. The 4 inches hangar deck armor of Design X1 was a reduction from the 6-inch called for in the original X configuration. The waterline armor belt was also 4 inches thick, but only covered the central portion of the ship to form the armored citadel. The belt was closed by 3-inch transverse bulkheads fore and aft. 1.5 inches of armor extended 40 feet forward and 60 feet after the belt to protect the waterline against splinter damage. The underwater defense system was a layered system of liquid and air-filled compartments, backed by an inclined holding bulkhead that was 4 inches thick at the top and tapered to a thickness of 2 inches at the bottom, and was estimated to resist a 1,200-pound explosive charge. An earlier version, however, had been estimated to be able to resist a 2,000-pound charge, but failed against a 1,000-pound charge in a full-scale head. The magazines for the 4.5-INCH guns and the steering gear both lay outside the armored citadel and had their own armor. The magazines had 4-inch roofs and sides with 3-inch ends, while the steering gear also had a 4-inch roof, but only 3-inch sides and ends. Ordering and cancellation. Well before the design was finalized, 4 ships were ordered in July 1943. Africa was originally ordered as an unnamed Audacious-class carrier, but the order was modified to a Malta-class ship on 12 July 1943. Malta, New Zealand and Gibraltar were all ordered 3 days later. New Zealand was originally ordered from Camel Laird, but the contract was transferred to Harland and Wolff on 22 July 1944. The Admiralty ordered Vickers not to order any more material on 27 April 1944, and given that final drawings were never issued to the builders, it is unlikely that any of them actually did more than preliminary work. None of the ships were ever laid down and all of them were cancelled before the end of 1945.